velocities at the same time and looks exactly the same.
But it's no longer stable what's composed system. And then stochastic gradient descent will just collapse altogether.
So remember that your training classification, assuming that hyperparameter is fixed. So you're doing your training with a hyperparameter value.
Yeah.
So that is going to give you a loss landscape that is fixed to a hyperparameter. Even if it's constant or not, or how does it affect your loss and your prediction is a completely different thing. But when you train with temperature, the one thing you can say is that after it's been trained,
Yes.
a larger value of temperature is going to give you a smaller variation with respect to input. But this legit depends on all the weights that come before it, right?
Correct.
So if you train with a different temperature, then everything that comes up to set I is going to be different. Okay? What's interesting is that temperature is not propagated backwards. It ends here. All these values, they don't depend on temperature. Cool? So it's only up until the legits. And the last argument on why it works is actually an argument on generalization capabilities, which I think is actually what should belong to the first paper, because they make a strong assumption on why they generalize. But here they give an interesting explanation, which is based on learnability and stability. It's based on two definitions. Basically, if you have the loss for a given learning algorithm, and you have to prove that it's bounded, basically. There is a global minimum, you know that it exists because of general universal approximation theorem of neural nets. So that value exists, you have to prove that it's bounded. So that means that this is an asymptotic empirical risk minimizer. And the second is that it's stable. What this says is that if you change one example in the training set, the loss also has to be bounded. Okay? What the theorem proven in 34 says is that if a learning rule A is an asymptotic empirical risk minimizer and it is stable, then it is going to generalize well. We can go there for that proof, but I'd rather not. And then what they argue is that, well, first, so distillation is a risk minimizer. It is an asymptotic empirical risk minimizer, basically because it is trained to be one, right? So you're training it with gradient descent, so you know that the neural network has that the loss function has a global minimum because it's a global minimum with respect to the number of samples, because it's a maximum likelihood estimator. So you know that it is an asymptotic risk minimizer. And then it is stable because of the objective function that you're picking. So the objective function is basically giving you loss values with respect to the input examples, right? So if you change one example, your loss is not going to explode all of a sudden, because it depends on all of the examples. So since those two things are true, then you can say that distillation is going to generalize. And this is what I thought was one of the interesting parts of this paper. It sort of gives a bit more of intuition on why distillation actually works and why it actually helps generalization. So, again, the big question is, does it work? Does it actually protect against adversarial attacks? And, well, the answer is a big resounding yes. So let's start with, they tested in two datasets, MNIST and Cypher10, and they train a set of convolutional networks, and they achieve close to state-of-the-art performance. So it's like 95%, 99.5% in MNIST and 80-something%, 99.51 in MNIST and 80.95 in Cypher10, which are close to state-of-the-art. They are not completely state-of-the-art, but it works for their purposes. Okay? So the first question that they are trying to answer is, okay, so first, does the adversarial attack work? So they basically iterate on the diagram that I showed before, where they try to generate an adversarial sample. So they take 100 random samples from the test set, and they generate an adversarial sample for each classification target. So you have 900 samples per dataset. and then they see if any of them were successful, and they measure how many of the attacks were successful. That is those are the baselines. So for MNIST, they were very successful, and as they increase the temperature, that's for MNIST, you can see that the success rate drops dramatically. So this means that only 0.45% of the adversarial crafting actually worked, so actually confused the network. And for Cypher 10, it's a bit lower, the success rate, but still pretty dramatic drop from 92%. So temperature 1 means no distillation, right? So it drops from 91 to 0.45 and then from 92 to 5%, which means that it's actually giving it some robustness.
Sorry, wouldn't temperature 1 also mean one sort of distillation because you change the targets on which is being trained? Because you see there's already a small drop, it's already there.
It's it's the minimum distillation. So that baseline is made with Fx, so with the output of, so they are these F. Okay, that's true. Okay, so the second thing that they want to verify is that there is no drop in performance. Here's where they quantify the drop in performance. So blue is MNIST, yellow is Cypher 10. What they show is that for some values of temperature, they actually get an improvement in performance. They don't say it's significant. They say it's just like a curiosity that you get a 1% improvement. They argue that for MNIST, it's almost impossible to get an improvement in performance because it's 99.5% already. But then the drop in performance is not so dramatic that you would say, okay, this is a useless model now. So you get at maximum minus 1%, and the more you increase the temperature, it sort of stabilizes. Figure 9 shows, it's trying to show how these adversarial gradients change. So how much okay, so this is zero with a distinct. So this is how big how big the perturbation had to be. So how much was this delta x? So how big this delta x had to be to get a successful attack. So this is with no distillation. These colors are a bit confusing because there's a lot, but they're more on the 10 to the power minus 3 and minus 5. So they are on this side. Whereas as they increase the temperature, they all become blue, which is basically between 0 and 10 to the power minus 40. So these. What? Yeah. So that is the. So that is not the. Grade. That is the. Sorry. Yeah.
It's the gradients.
Yeah. It's the. Adversarial amplitude.
It's the frequency of it.
It's the gradients which mean that the perturbation has to be higher.
Yeah. So here the perturbation has to be higher to produce a sample. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah. And so this is the robustness metric that we were saying before. They are trying to see how. So this is the robustness of the baseline in M.